Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the CEO Journals podcast. Today on the show, you have the pleasure of listening to Joshua Lisec. Joshua, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty dandy. Thanks for having me on your show, Ethan.
No, the pleasure is mine, and I can't wait for you to drop a ton of knowledge for all of our listeners today. So, for those who don't know who you are, just give us a quick 60-second introduction of who you are and what you do.
Sure thing, sure thing. As Ethan said, I'm Joshua Lisec. I am the only award-winning, celebrity-recommended #1 international best-selling certified professional ghostwriter in the world. I have ghostwritten over 40 books for everyone from your A-list celebrities, entrepreneur success stories we all know of, the breakout stars of tomorrow, and even the occasional great grandma who wants to tell her story, what it was like to grow up during the war.
I love that. But how does one get so many accolades? Because that was a mouthful, and you've clearly learned that off by heart, which is pretty good going.
When your hobby, your passion, your lifestyle is your business, they just naturally seem to add up.
Perfect. And I can't wait to dive more into that. But the way I like to start all my episodes is by throwing it back with my guests and asking them about their upbringing and time at school. So let's focus on the 15-year-old version of yourself. How did you find school? Were you the class clown that sat in the back and didn't really concentrate? Or were you that straight A student, put all the effort in and just absolutely nailed it?
I was the nerd. So I was homeschooled, as a lot of people are where I live in the States, in Ohio specifically. Homeschooling is quite popular here in the Midwest. So I was homeschooled. And in that type of an upbringing, your learning is self-directed. Basically, what you want to study, so long as it meets the minimum requirements, that's what you study. So I was regularly getting ahead of the lesson plans. We had all sorts of curriculum. Um, by that age, I was fluent in classical Latin. Interestingly enough, my mother had us take the Cambridge University Latin, so the actual Latin curriculum at Cambridge University. It met a foreign language requirement, so that's what we studied. Interestingly enough, another thing that I did, 15-year-old Joshua did, because there wasn't much of a social life as a homeschooled kid. One of my hobbies, my pastime, my great extracurricular activity was to read the entire Encyclopedia Americana, A through Z. When I'd get done with my schoolwork, I had nothing much else to do during the cold, long hours of winter. And so I would sit down in our cellar, aka schoolroom, and pick up a volume and just start reading. So I became quite a bit of a sponge, which, as it turns out, is extraordinarily helpful when you become a ghostwriter because you already know a lot about the topic that your new client is wanting to write about.
Definitely. Being homeschooled then, did you find it difficult to socialize and make friends? Or was that something that you sort of just picked up over time and were okay with that despite being homeschooled and having a little social life, as you quote?
I definitely had a social life amongst other homeschool kids because there's different co-ops where a bunch of parents are like homeschooling their kids all together, and then different parents will kind of donate their time, so to speak, in teaching a class. We had actually a homeschool basketball team, so we played a lot of private schools, public schools, in the kind of in the Midwest, so we got that element as well. But it was very strange going from homeschool to college to university because it was the first time I was exposed to popular culture. And I found that I was a high school senior at 15, which is the equivalent, I think, in England would be like the last year of schooling before you go
Yeah.
on to university or to college. So I entered university at relatively much younger than my peers were, and I could not relate to them at all. They're over there talking about the latest video game, and I'm like, okay, so how fast can we get jobs with our degrees? And they're, oh yeah, I got hammered on Saturday night. Oh, good party and the booze. I'm like, don't you have a job or something? Because I had multiple part-time
Yeah.
jobs. I started my business when I was in college, and so it was very different because I could not relate it a lot to my peers at the time, which it turns out was okay, because when you start your business at 19 and everybody else is busy drinking beer or something like that, you have quite a bit of an advantage in the years ahead.
For sure. So you don't regret that at all. You don't look back and thinking, I could have done the fun stuff in university that all of these people were talking about. That's not a regret of yours at all.
That's right, especially since many of them are still paying off their student loan debts and will be for the next couple of decades.
And you've completely smashed that out of the park already.
Oh yes, yeah. Being homeschooled, it's pretty easy to qualify for scholarships. So I got quite a few of those to pay for things, and even had some extra left over, for paying my bills and that sort of thing, which is pretty awesome.
Perfect. And as a 19-year-old in that position as well, you must have felt pretty good about yourself because, as you say, looking at the others that are in a hell of a lot of debt, you must have felt pretty smug, to say the least.
Yeah, because you're starting a lot further on down the line. So at this point right now, I'm still in my 20s to this day, and I own several investment properties, real estate properties that produce residual income for us, our family, every single month, whether I work or not. Our family can pay the bills, or at least a portion of the bills, to survive. And to think that a lot of my peers, fellow millennials, are doing the exact opposite. They're paying out every month, no matter what. They have to meet those student loan payments. It's a sad commentary on our generation, unfortunately, and that's what I gave my TEDx talk about, was the world of the millennial coming out of college and university with a student loan debt, with very few opportunities. And I tell the story of how I did it differently from just about day one. As soon as I only lasted about a year in the corporate world. For that reason, like, yeah, this is not what I got 2 college degrees for. This is not it.
So I find that topic super interesting because being 20 and myself, I didn't go to university either. I went straight into a job. So and all of my friends are at university, and as you say, racking up debt, this, that, and the other. Nothing against it at all. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. I've always worked from the day I turned 16. So that's when you can get a job in the
Hmm.
UK. Got a job the day I turned 16 and always been obsessed with just working from that point. So when university came around, when I knew I wouldn't have time to work alongside, I thought, God, I'm going to have no money. And from 16, I've always had that income for myself. I've always worked towards. My parents never, as soon as I started earning money, they didn't give me money anymore. So the fact that that luxury would have been taken away from me, I was like, no, God, no, that is not for me. So I went down a different route to all my friends. Majority of my school went to university. It was because I went to a school where academics were pushed quite hard. Everyone did quite well in what they did. So university was the route that they pushed, and they it was supported for me to not go to university, but not so. They were quite hesitant to say. Like they were pretty much like, "Are you sure you want? Are you sure this? Not many. Everyone goes to university. Are you sure this is the right bit?" I personally think, and same as you say, I think I made the right decision because again, I haven't got that debt, and I've been earning money. So
Hmm.
I love that view and the fact that you have done a very similar, but you've actually got 2 degrees and no debt. So you're in a win-win situation there. So you touched on the fact that you were in the corporate world for a year. What did you do?
Yes, yes. So I did I guess I had a kind of a composite job. I don't even remember what my official title was exactly, but it was something, it was kind of a blend of human resources, people operations inside of the business, along with proficiency and development, which is basically building out standard operating procedures to systematize the business to make it more profitable and sell more easily, which it did for about $74 million soon after I left. Um, you probably should have negotiated some type of payout there, but it is what it is when you're 20 years old, right? And then the other portion of the job actually was marketing communications, creating a lot of content, marketing assets, collateral for the website, for campaigns, that sort of a thing. And I was a little bit all over the place with what my job was, and that I think worked really well to transition right from the corporate world to my own gig full time, which I'd had on the side for a couple of years by that point. And because I had minimized my risk rather than going from crazy in debt green college kid to working at the bottom of a corporate hierarchy to trying to go solo paying down student debt. That's like the worst way, I think, to try entrepreneurship. In my case, I was completely debt free. I had a savings. I had a business I started when I was in my third of 4 years in university. So I kind of knew what I was doing. I had some solo income for being a freelancer, And then I had the corporate job, that I got soon after that. So my corporate cubicle to entrepreneurial success story was safer than a lot of others. And I always recommend that you try to have as much of a cushion as you can, because that allows you to go for the big wins rather than take any old crappy client who comes along.
For sure, and I definitely agree with that, because you hear these stories of people literally going out on a whim and hoping that it works, and in some cases it does, but in many cases it doesn't. We only seem to see the success stories, but we don't hear about the people, the majority that end actually fail. So at what point did you realize then that, oh God, like I can do this? I can make a serious amount of money from doing this side gig.
I think it was actually when my boss at the time, my supervisor at the communications company, the corporate job, she actually took me aside one day and told me, because she knew I was freelancing on the side, doing some professional writing, worked on a couple of books at that point already. She told me, Joshua, there's no future for you here. You are really, really good at what you do as a writer. And we're not ever going to have a full-time writer position open because this is a tech company, and you've already written everything you could possibly write for us, is what she said. Said, you're good enough that you should be writing professionally. This is not you're fired in 2 weeks conversation or getting the pink slip, anything like that. It was in your own best interest, Joshua, you need to start your own full-time gig, transition out of this job into something full-time. And when your supervisor says that to you, and there's no please leave, please quit, anything like that, it was, we hate to get you out of here, but your real, it's obvious that your real skill is in writing professionally, so that's what you should be doing. One day, and so it was a couple of days later, I turned in my notice and I transitioned to the full-time gig. That was about 6.5 years ago that I did that. Very, very, very good decision for sure.
Sure, and I think that's super interesting as well that your boss actually came out and said that to you, as if to say, look, why are you still here, sort of thing. Like, you are so good at what you do, why aren't you taking advantage of that? The fact that your boss, who you clearly do extremely good work for, you would be a detriment to lose, the fact that she came up to you, or he, I don't know, sorry, I missed that, but the fact that she came up to you and said that, it must have been quite inspiring for you as well to then go, cool, am I actually that good?
Yeah, it's always an advantage when someone that you respect gives you a green light, a thumbs up, a go for it kid type of a signal. And funny enough, a couple of years after that, she took her own advice and she quit and she started her own consulting company. So I think she was possibly living vicariously through me with giving me that advice. And then, wow, he actually made a good go of it. Maybe I should do that too. And now she's still running her consulting company. So I think 5 years or so later, after she quit that same company and is now doing her own thing, going solo. So it's funny how life turns out, but sometimes it can be that uncanny.
For sure. And as you say, that's hilarious, the fact that she then did it as well. But you're both clearly very good at what you do. And how's that company doing now that you both work for, now that you've both gone? Does it still exist?
Yeah, it was bought again and then bought again, with all sorts of corporate restructuring. As far as I know, it's the company who purchased the company that purchased the company is quite profitable. And of course, I like to think that it was because of the standard operating procedures and systems that I designed inside of the company that made it a saleable, viable company.
Of course, and I'm sure it was. I'm sure you can put your stamp on that one, so it's there. So for what you do, it must be quite difficult to get a reputation, because there are. So I'm not very familiar with the ghostwriting industry. But I assume there are a lot of people out there that do your job, but it's then actually getting the reputation of you are the person to come to. So I assume that entails a lot of free, very cheap labor to begin with to get testimonials. How was that for you at first, and how quickly did you manage to build your portfolio to get to the point you are now?
Yes. So as I said, I've ghostwritten over 40 books. To kind of run with what you're saying. Yes, the first few products did not pay nearly what I desired at the time, but everyone does have to start somewhere. In fact, I always say that my very first freelance writing project I ever got paid $1.67 an hour. That's maybe a pound and a half or so, I think, maybe a little bit less than that, for 1 hour of labor, which of course is just horrific, well below the minimum wage. But I was willing to do it. And for me, that was my first confirmation that I was on the right path, that someone will pay me outside of a job to write for them. So that, strangely enough, was quite a confidence boost. Anyone who earns any amount of money for themselves as a self-employed person will say that same thing. I made a couple of pounds working on this website, and it was the most rewarding money I've ever earned in my entire life. And of course, it just goes on up from there. I certainly felt the same way. To get back to the point you were bringing up about how does someone whose profession is mostly confidential between themselves and the clients, how do you word of mouth market? Well, one of the focuses that I have had to grow my company is to position myself not as a writer. I'll write a Word document for you. You have to figure out how to go get it published. I am a concierge, all-inclusive solution. So when someone comes to me with their book idea, we write the book in a full-length manuscript. So it's like, imagine whether it's a novel or it's nonfiction, full-length, industry-standard, beautiful, professionally written book. But we also reformat it for publication, digital, audio, and the actual print book, the paperback. And then we support in the marketing of it, the launching of it, the publishing. So we've called that part of the process ghost publishing, because in ghost writing, someone else does the work, you take the credit. Ghost publishing, someone does the work, you have a book that's available for sale in over 100 countries. So it's really cool because you're buying a business. So what we've done to promote the business is create case studies. There have been a few authors over the years who didn't really care about a confidentiality agreement, and of course we've really leveraged that transparency in the business to say, hey, here's how we do things. Here's what we did for previous clients. Whenever I'm talking to an aspiring author, I'll share with them a case study of what I did for a previous author. Like, hey, I sold 30,000 copies of my book in just a few months after launch. Joshua was instrumental in that. Hey, my book has brought in over $1 million into my business, and it was only possible because Joshua wrote my book and helped me get it published. Like, when you have those types of statements, nothing else matters, and I have no competition at that point. Because the other writers say, I can write well, I have a creative writing degree. It's like that versus, this guy made $1 million off of his book. How did he do it? I need to talk to that guy. So the focus on results rather than my own abilities really does set me apart in this industry. And that's why even early on in my career, I was often the only ghostwriter anyone was talking to because of the deliverable that I was producing, which was not just a book. It's an actual business in which you, the author, are making royalties from day one.
For sure. So you actually have the connections to get a book on the shelf.
That's correct.
So I assume that's what people find the most difficult part, because anyone can go out and write a book, but then to actually have it physically on a shelf must be quite hard. But if they come to you, you involve that in your service.
Yes, what we've done is we've taken with this ghost publishing model, we take the best of self-publishing and the best of traditional brick and mortar publishing. We've combined the pros and removed the cons from the process. So like with self-publishing, higher royalties, total creative control, those are the upsides and its speed. Those are the upsides, the pros of self-publishing. The cons are a lot of self-published books are just drivel quality. They're just awful. I can't tell you how many authors that I've worked with that said, I really don't want this to look like a self-published book. They'll specifically say that. I want to go an independent route like this ghost publishing thing, but I want to make sure it doesn't look like it's self-published. So that's always a priority. Traditional publishing, you have obviously quality, distribution, access to bookstores and libraries in countless countries. We bring that into the process as well, to the point that when you look at one of my clients, one of my authors' finished books, it's indistinguishable from a traditionally published book by one of the big publishers out there in terms of its quality. And that's what we're really going for. That's what people are willing to pay for.
For sure. So for business owners, entrepreneurs, podcasters, influencers, you name it, what are the benefits of having a book? What avenues can having a book open for you?
I always tell authors that having a book is like having a key that opens any door for your business. What opportunities are you looking for? Are you looking to build authority with the future clients that you're targeting in your marketing campaigns? We'll put a book at the forefront of that. So people see you and they're like, wow, this person wrote the book on this topic. They're the most trustworthy on this. Do you want additional credibility in the media? Go to any website, The Guardian, The Telegraph, CNN, Fox News, any news website, and just search the keyword author of, and you'll find thousands of articles in which journalists specifically quote someone and then put behind their name author of, and then the title of their book. Because when you're an author, you are the recognized expert. And that's the last real benefit of being an author that has, again, multiple benefits that it can produce for you, multiple results rather, that being an author can produce. And that is being the go-to expert, because you've packaged your wisdom, your secrets, your successes into a 300-page masterpiece. You're clearly not a charlatan, a fraud, a fly-by-night person trying to make a quick buck, but you are the, in fact, recognized expert. And of course, what you can do with that book is use it to get meetings, whether that's with potential investors, whether that's with your dream 100 clients, or maybe you want to use a book to generate leads for your online business. And people can buy your course, your program, your services by reading your book. Do you want speaking gigs? A book can get those for you. All of the above, we have helped our clients do exactly the same inside of their businesses. So like, I always want to quote J. Conrad Levinson. Anyone who's read Guerrilla Marketing, that famous book on 12 business marketing tactics, will be familiar with that. Jay always said that he made about 10 million from that book. Only 30,000 in terms of his revenue was the royalties, but the spin-off books, the additional consulting, the speaking fees, the coaching programs amounted to that remaining 9.9 million in revenue that he made from his book. We take that same approach with authors, in which, yes, we've had clients who sold tens of thousands of copies every single month of their book, but the real money comes from you buy the book, you say, oh my gosh, this person is amazing, I have to get more of their stuff. And then they join your program, they hire your consulting services, etc., etc. And that's where the real money comes from a book that's only possible because you have this ultimate authority building, credibility establishing, expertise enhancing masterpiece working on your behalf.
Sounds like I need to write a book on how to start a podcast. But no, as you say, it's incredible. And that case study there alone, the fact that only 30,000 in that he actually made from his book alone, but it opened that door to make over $9 million, which is unfathomable. It's that's a huge amount of money, and all from a book, which is amazing. So what is one of the biggest success stories you've had with a client? Is that an example of one of in that area, or is there a bigger success that you're allowed to talk about?
That's kind of in the ballpark. As I mentioned, there's an author in the digital marketing space that I worked with. He unsolicited, so he kind of went away from our confidentiality agreement. He was like, I don't care who knows. He recorded a 90-second testimonial. He said, hey, post this on your website. So I did, and he says, because of Joshua's work writing this book, helping me get it published, in 12 months. $1 million in revenue directly from this book would not have been possible without Joshua. Those are his words. And of course, it's amazing because he had a relatively small audience at the time, I think maybe several hundred in his Facebook group, maybe a couple thousand on his email list. Like, we're not talking like a mega superstar at the time, that makes his story so much more remarkable. Because when those A-list celebrities see a story like his, they go, oh my God, if I work with this guy, I can make even much more than that because my audience is 100,000 people. Or with one of my newest clients, he is a household name. I calculated in 200 million households. This particular author is known. So, of course, we're expecting a gloriously profitable launch and rollout of his book coming in the new year. So that approach where you think, how can I open additional doors of revenue a book is a multiplier, right? Think of all the services you already have, the speaking that you've done in the past, anything that you sell. A book comes in and it multiplies the potential revenue that you can receive inside of your business. And it's all because of a book. And even if you don't sell a copy of your book, I have one client who's in the manufacturing space. This is hilarious because he doesn't actually sell his book. He just prints a few copies of it. He literally puts them in the trunk of his car. When he goes meet with a prospect, he either mails him a copy of the book ahead of time, or he just drops it off with him during the meeting, and he uses that to get multi-million-dollar consulting deals and product sales deals. And it's amazing because all he has to do is show them that book, and they say, "Wow, you're the
Yeah.
expert in this." That other CEO who's only been in the industry for this long they don't have a book. So it's in these unusual industries like manufacturing, that's like you're the first established author, the first known author in your industry. So it's not even like you have to be in digital marketing or entrepreneurship or business. You can be in a wildly obscure category to be successful. I have another one who's in civil engineering, wildly popular, successful. Another that's in water treatment, of all the industries, right? But when you're the first person who says, I am the author, I wrote the book on this industry, that, my friend, is the opener of doors.
For sure. And it's super interesting, even when you go into detail about these, as you say, not so people, normal person wouldn't think that person's going to have a book. But when they come out and go, I've got a book, you're going to think, wow, this guy must know his shit. He must know what he's talking about. So then, as you
That's
say,
right.
that expertise there and then is displayed. So money aside, though, that this job must be extremely fulfilling for you. Like, knowing the fact that your expertise and your knowledge in this area is helping these people to succeed,
Yes.
like to extreme, like what people can't even imagine, like so much success. But this is all coming from your expertise. That must be extremely self-fulfilling for you.
It does, and it makes all those sleepless nights in the cellar reading encyclopedias worth it.
For sure. So to contrast that, but that aside, then, what's the worst day you've had? Because we see all the success stories, especially on social media. We see the private jets, the fast cars, the mansions, but that is the product of what we all know was a hard journey. So, what was, if you can pick a day out of a hat, one of your worst days, what would that be?
Yes, yes. I talked about this I think about 4 years ago or so on the Side Hustle Show, a popular podcast for people who are kind
Yep.
of transitioning. And I was definitely in hustle mode at the time. And this was a few months before I did that interview. But it was basically when I was convinced that I had meningitis, which was a brain disease. And I had been burning the candle at both ends to try to make something of a real business here. I was in that transition from like freelancer to business owner, and you're trying to figure out how to go from a self-employed, pulled in every direction, 1,000-hat wearing magician, making
Yeah.
not as much as you should, to an actual business owner with consistent income. And I was having difficulty making that transition. So there was one night where one of my clients said something effective like, "You don't sound like yourself." I was on a call, and I did. Something felt off. And they said, "What are your symptoms?" And I shared my symptoms, and they're like, "You should probably get off this call and go to the emergency room, to the hospital, because you probably have, as I said, meningitis, a potentially deadly brain disease." And of course, I had all the symptoms. And so I go in, I'm disoriented by this time. My fiance at the time is there. Everyone's kind of panicking. The nurse to the doctors. I overhear him whispering like, "This guy has meningitis." and so they pumping me up with drugs, including morphine. Um, and I hear one of the doctors say to the nurse, "Let's try to make sure he makes it." Like, what? What? I know, like they probably should have had that conversation outside of the room. And so I'm sitting there on all these drugs, half disoriented, but I wasn't quite in the state where I'm putting together these memories, because one of my family members overheard them say that, and they're like, "Oh no, is this the end?" And so I'm laying there laid up. They're gonna do a brain scan, I think some type of an MRI maybe. And I'm sitting there laying on that table, just like asking myself that question that a lot of people don't ask at that age. in their early 20s. Is this it? And that's what I asked myself, is this it? And I thought about it for a second, and my mind was taken back to when I left the cubicle. And I thought to myself, even if this is the it, I made the right decisions to get to this point. Obviously, it wasn't my own fault that I contracted this potentially deadly brain disease, but because I was living and working for myself, not for the man or for corporate America or whatever, but I was trying to blaze my own trail, I knew that I was on the right path. And even if this was it, that it was the right path. Of course, it turns out that I did not indeed pass away that night. I did have several painful procedures after that, with the pain of which still echoes on a cold winter's night now and again. But I did recover, and it was that moment, I guess you could say, kept me on the path to go from frazzled solopreneur to established business person that I am today. That was a great transition inside of my business, and for me personally, was that moment asking myself, is this it?
Wow, that must have been so scary, especially when you heard the guy say, "Just make sure he makes it." I wouldn't have known what to think. I would have been sitting there like, "This guy's," as you say, we talk about experts. This guy's the expert. He studied this to be where he is today. And
Well, he didn't write a book, so.
well, if he had written a book, then you would have been thinking, "Oh crap, this is it." But I normally ask this question at the end of the episode, but this is a perfect segue into it now. But it's in relation to death, so completely on topic. So, are you afraid of dying?
I'll tell you, I'm not sure. I know that there's a certain percentage of your listeners who will be familiar with what's called simulation hypothesis. Have you heard of that before, Ethan?
Yep.
Yes, yes. So the 30-second review, it's the idea that just as video games have become so much more advanced in the last 40 years, going from basically a bunch of pixels with Pong, right, back in the 1970s, to now where we have these vast simulated worlds with lifelike graphics and virtual reality, 40 years from now, it is entirely possible that with additional technology, video games will be indistinguishable from reality to the average gamer. 40 years after that, we could very well get to the point where we are, in our day-to-day reality, living simulated lives. And so the idea of the simulation hypothesis is that you and I are actually living inside of a simulation right now. Perhaps, as astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson suggests, we're an ancestor simulation in which people in the future are trying to figure out what went wrong. And so they're trying to piece together, based on information on real people, that what exactly went to what, let's try to recreate the past. And so we're actually right now digital representations of who we once were in the past. Or there could be any other manner of reasons that are being simulated right now. And there's also folks like Elon Musk who are convinced that we're in a simulation. Other people that I could name drop, but I get the idea that some of the smartest, brightest, most successful people on the planet are 100% convinced that we are living inside of a simulation, that we are simulated. Some of us are non-player characters, NPCs. Others of us are actual players who either are aware that they're living inside of a simulation, that they're kind of getting their bearings in this world, or they have chosen to opt out of their memories and they live among us. Perhaps it's you, Ethan, perhaps it's me, that we're actual players inside of this simulated world. Every strange, uncanny thing you can imagine, from paranormal activity to religious experiences and miracles, is explained within simulation hypothesis, because the simulators can allow for all religions to be true at once. They can also allow for all paranormal experiences to be valid, all coincidences to be valid. So to bring it all the way back around to our question about death, I'm not sure, because I'm not sure what death looks like. If we're organic matter or if we're digital, perhaps reincarnation is a nod to our skins or the source code of each of us to be repurposed for something else, so we don't ever actually die. We could have this whole conversation, over and over and over again. I'm sure, but for me personally, it's fun to think about. Are we fact simulated or are we real? But at the end of the day, I'm more so focused on living a life that I don't regret, because I've been in that position before. of, is this it? So having stood there and asked myself that question, and I was okay to the point that you can be okay. Now I have more responsibilities. My wife and I, of course, my fiance and I, we got married. We have a son now. We have more responsibilities, obligations to clients. So for me, optimizing my living and living the best, most upright life that I possibly can, an exemplary life, that one that leaves a legacy for my descendants, that's my top priority, so that whether or not death is to be feared or not, I live a life that I don't regret.
Definitely. And I find, as you say, that topic is super interesting. And that could be an episode for a podcast alone. Like it's one of those topics that you can definitely get into such a deep discussion about, because people will have conflicting thoughts on what they actually believe. And as you say, I don't know. We could be, we couldn't be. Some days I believe we are, some days I believe we don't. It changes, and because you hear all these different opinions and you see everyone saying different things. So it's all within, but it's just, as you say, living a life you don't regret. And that's exactly what I do, what I want to do as well. And the fact that you were there and you got to ask yourself that question, and at the time you said you were happy. You wouldn't, if you had gone, you wouldn't have minded, because you had done what you wanted to do. You'd pursued what you wanted to do for yourself, opposed to doing something for someone else.
Yes, it wasn't so much that I had a lifetime's worth of accomplishments and a legacy to pass on, which I did not, but I did not regret my choices in
Yeah.
life to get where I had been. They were not things like, oh, I should have done this. I wish I would have done this. If only I could go back. There was none of that, because even though I was so early in my life and in my career, I was on the right path. And I, obviously want to be convinced that I still am. And I certainly would have to answer it the same way, that if this is it, I still find myself on the proper path.
So where can you see this path going then? Where do you want this business to go? Because you refer to we a lot throughout this episode, so you've clearly got a team around you. How can you see this team progressing, and where do you want it to end up in the end?
Yes, yes. So my vision for the business is to give specifically entrepreneurs, is to give them a way to manifest the voice behind their mission. So that's what drives the entrepreneur's wordsmith, this business, is people who they have a powerful, life-changing, industry upending message, helping them word it properly, putting everything all in one place to have a Bible for their business. You might say a sacred text that is the North Star for the direction of the business and for their industry for the rest of their natural lives. Talk about an amazing, exciting, fun vision. So I don't ever expect to be getting out of the ghostwriting business, not 20, not 40 years from now. But what I do want to do in order to create generational wealth for my family is, as I've said at the outset, we invest in rental properties. So we have several which produce residual passive income for the family. So basically acquiring more properties which we can pay for in cash, because property in the Midwest is ridiculously inexpensive compared to some of the bigger cities around the world. So it's good to take the profits that are from our earnings and put it right into investments that turn around within a couple of months, start earning some income off of that, getting tenants in there. So basically multiplying what we've already done, adding to what we've already done. Something else I've done recently is tried to well, not tried, I'm actually doing it, but passing on to other aspiring ghostwriters how to make it in this business and become a recession-proof, big money ghostwriter, so that no matter what happens in our economy in the coming years, you and your family are set. I have a program that opens up in November where I'm taking my first cohort through this particular program to get to the levels where you're earning those 6-month, 12-month projects, multiple six-figure income as a ghostwriter, and it all be a realistic result of following a specific, smart, proven process.
Sounds so exciting for you, and I'm excited for you. So do you wake up every day and cannot wait to do what you do, I assume? Because I would.
Yes, it's quite a life that you can't wait to get into. It makes me wonder if I'm one of the users rather than one of the non-player characters.
Full circle, all relates back. You have dropped some incredible value. We've had some super, super interesting conversations. I've learned a lot and thoroughly enjoyed myself. But there are three questions on three topics that I don't believe are spoken about enough that I like to ask all my guests at the end of every single episode. So we've already done death, so that only leaves us with two. But these are in relation to money and relationships. The one in relation to money, I personally don't think relates directly, but some do, most don't. But I like to hear your thoughts regardless. So, question number one is, what does the word success mean to you?
It looks like waking up at about 4:45 in the morning without your alarm and get your bearings in those few waking moments between dreams and reality. And your half asleep self says, "Is it time to get up?" And then your waking part of yourself says, "I can't wait to get up." And you snap awake without caffeine and you hit what's next. And that's all because you want to, because you're pulled rather than, "Oh, I'm gonna push myself to get up. Oh, I hate this job, I hate my life, I hate this house, I hate this family, I hate this spouse." But rather you're pulled by what excites you, that you're building around you. And that you can experience even in your early 20s, as I have, or later on down the line. So that is an image of success. The 4:45 excitement that wakes you up to start your day before the world has even gotten out of their REM cycle. That's success. Yes.
I love that, and that's the first time someone's hit it from that angle, and this is why I love asking that, like, these questions at the end, because I get so many different answers, and they all impact me. I look at them and think, God, yeah, agreed, and it just gives me more to look at, as well as I hope it helps the listeners think about this sort of thing as well. But seeing that, relating that to a vision and scenario, that's the first time someone's done that. So great job, something new, something different. That's what we love to hear. So see if you can do that with the next question as well, with regards to relationships. So throughout your journey so far, have you found it difficult to maintain relationships, whether that be with family, friends, loved ones, time with your children? Or have you found ways for those people to accompany you on your journey? So found ways that they can actually experience your journey with you?
Yes, as a married man with a family, in this case, a little boy, you find that single and or childless people, they just kind of fade from your life unless they're already in your family, like a brother or sister, sister-in-law, for example, new spouse, for example, or they're one of your clients or vendors. They fade from your life because they just don't quite get what you're going through. Trying to raise a little human in a functional way, building a business with your family. And of course, it's my case, but my wife is the vice president of entrepreneurs, Wordsmith. We have, of course, a team of people that support. So what we're building, it requires several hands, but they're key roles. So for me, I found that obviously I think the most important relationship right now would be with my wife, and of course our son, and then there's our obligations and responsibilities to our clients. In a lot of ways, those replace your, "Hey, let's go drinking on the weekends, bro," sort of relationships, because I'm talking to them on weekends, troubleshooting and making sure everything's going well, and bouncing ideas back and forth on the weekends, like via text or WhatsApp or something like that. Like, that's what we do. So I do not feel socially unfulfilled, but I'm okay with those relationships with people who we're just not at the same page in life. It's okay to release them into their own journey, for sure.
So how do you prioritize between your wife and kid and your work? Because obviously, as you said, your wife is the vice president, so she must understand what you're doing, which is obviously a dynamic that must work quite well, because if you're stressed and you've got lots of work to do, she's going to understand that as well. So that must work quite well. But how do you prioritize between the two then?
Yes, it's common. I guess you could say, what needs must be met.
Yeah.
And the primary need, of course, is our little one. And after that, obviously, comes health. And along with that comes, what do our clients need from us? And of course, we are sticklers for project management and tight deadlines, fulfilling our obligations. So everything is planned months in advance. So we know when stuff has to be done. And as new projects come up, sales calls come up, podcast interviews come up, we adjust, we work with it, and we're okay with being flexible because we know that the ends we're working for are not the means themselves. Like, this is not it, so to speak, right? Where we're working towards a point where we can have more students that we're training in the ghostwriting program, the Ghostwrite and Prosper program, it's called. So we can have a bigger and higher value, longer term relationship with authors. So we can have the rental properties. So if at any point we're like, let's put a pause on this and just leave town for the summer, like we can do that because we have the residual passive income from our real estate that takes care of all of our bills. So we know where we're going, we know what we're working for, we have the vision, and that makes the sacrifices, the long hours, the little sleep worth it.
You're clearly a very good team, and I love that. And I congratulate you for that as well. So, Joshua, we've dropped some incredible value throughout this episode. We've had some amazing conversations. I can't wait to listen to it back over, and I cannot wait for the listeners to just take it all in and actually go and put it to action. But where can they follow up with you, whether they have any questions, and where can they find your services if they want to write a book and become an expert?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm happy to chat with anyone, whether you're the aspiring author or the aspiring big money ghostwriter who wants to make their profession in this land as well. Come settle the territory with me. Come on down. If you're the aspiring author who wants to find out, like, is your book idea any good? Is it actually going to establish you as an expert? Head over to entrepreneurswordsmith.com. Entrepreneurs is plural. Word and Smith are Word and Smith. Entrepreneurswordsmith.com. You'll find there a book ideas generator that will help you get some structure to the ideas that are in your head so you can actually come up with a winning book idea in 30 seconds or less. Free tool, no opt-in required. If you're that aspiring ghostwriter who wants to make it in this industry, head on over to ghostwriteandprosper.com. I put together a free set of trainings that debunk the 7 myths about ghostwriting that keep most ghostwriters broke as F.
Love it. And they will be in the show notes below for everyone. So you don't have to remember those. Just simply click below. Once again, Joshua, thank you for your time. I cannot appreciate it more. And I hope everyone enjoyed this episode of CEO Journals.
Sure thing, Anthony. Thanks for having me on today.